Hi, welcome to another video in my Overexplained series. Today we are going to take a look at the Spanish opening, also called the Ruy Lopez. So it starts with e4 and e5. So with e4, e5, black puts a pawn in e5 and we get a symmetrical position. Then after knight f3, very logical. White attacks the pawn on e5, and what many black players do is go into is to put a knight on c6, and then we get this position. And Ruy Lopez arrives after the move bishop to b5. Now, what is the point of this bishop b5? The point is to put more pressure on black's center. So, for example, if white would take this knight, this pawn would be unprotected. It's not possible to win it right away. So many people play a6, and maybe you would think, well, doesn't that just lose a pawn? But it does not, since after takes and black would take with the d pawn, and after knight takes e5, black has a counter attack, queen d4, attacking the knight and the pawn. There's no good way to protect the knight, so the knight will have to move, and after queen takes e4, black has a perfectly good position. So let's go back. So the point here is not to take it immediately, but to put pressure on black center and keep increasing the pressure until the pressure gets too much, until the pressure gets too high. And because it's indirect pressure, it can take a lot longer for black to entangle than, let's say, in the Scotch opening, where the tension in the center is resolved very quickly. And this is more tactical, but as you can see, the pressure here in the center is mostly gone. That's why it's very principled actually, I think, to go bishop b5. And I know what you may be thinking. There's a ton of theory in these lines, and that is correct. There is an awful lot of theory. So it's probably, and black has a lot of good replies. So it's kind of high maintenance. On the other hand, I think these positions are very interesting to play, and you will get exposed to a lot of different pawn structures, ideas. Also, if you know the ideas of the Ruy Lopez, I think against many opponents you can just have a good game, because, maybe you don't know all the theory, but unless your opponent is rated over 2000, 2200 or something, probably he doesn't know the theory also. So here, let's see what happens if black plays a little bit too passive. So after d6, we can immediately play d4, put more pressure on the center. And now we are actually threatening to take on e5, also insert the capture on c6, and the end result would not be great for black. For example, let's say black plays bishop p4 here. That's already a mistake. Since we can take here, black takes back. Now we capture the queen. Black captures with a rook. We insert this check, saddling black with these weak pawns. And now it's important to realize that we can't take. That would be a huge blunder, since if we take now, that's mate on d1. But what we can do is just develop normally, maybe castle, and after we're developed, try to target these pawns here. So that's not good for black. So if black plays a6 here, third most popular move, it's also not good, since now we can take, and after d takes e5, d takes e5, we take the queen, we take the pawn, and now we are threatening a fork on f7. We are threatening to take this, and after let's say king e8, you can maybe take, but even better is just developing and picking up all these pawns later. So you can see this is just a disaster. And I want you to realize that all of these moves, for a player who doesn't know this or maybe isn't familiar, are pretty normal. I mean, you defend the pawn with knight c6. White is threatening to take your knight, so you defend this pawn with d6. But after d4, the pressure on this pawn makes it so that black has to do some thinking and make a somewhat difficult decision if he doesn't know the position. Note that we aren't really threatening d5 here, since let's say after this, black can always counterattack with a6, and you're not really winning anything. It's still an okay position for white, but I think here we could have done better. So here this is even way better for black, since he gets this bishop on a really nice diagonal, and maybe later he can push his pawns in the center. So that's not so good for us. So let's go back. So here after a6, takes, d takes e5. Many black players realize something went wrong, and they try to fix it by playing bishop to g4. In that case, notice that black would probably want to take the pawn, but then his pawn structure again gets messed up. Also, he has to invest one tempo. We can trade the queens again. So let's say castles, let's say black takes. And now we see that because we are already castled, this d1 mate trick isn't there anymore, which means we can just take on e5. This is a double attack, so probably the bishop will go back to d7, and this is just a totally winning position for white. So instead of d6 here, which is not such a good move, black has two main moves, which is a6. The point of a6 is, and after a6, white can decide either to take or to drop the bishop back to a4. That's usually what happens. Black now has the option of pushing b5 and solving the spin issue, which means that that after a6, bishop a4, d6 later now is possible and not so bad. And aside from a6, black also has the good move knight f6, counter-attacking this e4 pawn. So a6 is a good move, knight f6 is also a good move, the Berlin defense it's called. And after you see the second most popular move is d6, which is the old Steinitz defense, and that's really not so good. I think that idea is not so good. Either d4 or knight c3 are very decent options here. I like d4 since that immediately asks some questions. That immediately asks black some questions and puts pressure on the center. So after a6, bishop a4, black can immediately push b5. That's an option. He can do a number of things. Also note that when these pawns are coming to a6 and b5, one interesting idea for white is to play pawn to a4, try to undermine these pawns and make one of these pawns weak, or try to make them weak. So maybe it's even possible immediately, although I think probably castles here is better. Oh, sorry, it's black's turn. So let's say black plays d6. Yeah, then we can immediately play a4. Black usually, well, first of all, notice that this is not good. Since this bishop again becomes very active, this pawn is weak. So that's not what you want to do as black. And you should be happy with white if black does that. b4 is more reasonable. Then white can play a5 to try to make this pawn weak. What black also can do is play bishop b7. And after these trades, develop your pieces, and you see this pawn is weak, and white immediately targets it. So here, and let's say after b4, you see white's strategy of luring these pawns forward, making them weaker, is quite successful here. Obviously, black doesn't have to play like this, but I'm just showing you an example. Here we're back at the starting position, and let's say black goes knight f6 here into the Morphy defense. There are quite a few theoretical moves. Castles is a move, but also I like just the simple d3. It's kind of a slower approach. And the point is you want to play c3 and d4 later. Probably you'll have to overprotect this pawn first with rook e1. So let's say bishop c5, castles I guess, or knight c3, let's say castles, c3. And while the game continues from here, there are a few interesting maneuvers that you have to be aware of. First of all, once you play c3, you have a nice hole here for your bishop to come to. For example, in case of knight a5, now you can play bishop to c2. Also, once this pawn moves, this pawn will be protected one extra time by this bishop. If one maneuver to be aware of, let's quickly check if this, yeah, okay, this move is okay. So one maneuver I want you to be aware of is knight d2, f1, g3 or e3, and then the knight can come to f5 or h5. And what would be really nice is maybe you can, oh sorry, that's a little bit too many arrows. Maybe you can also put this knight here. Maybe you can bring the queen here in here. Maybe you can bring the queen in here. So I think, well, that's always a nice idea to remember. And obviously, you still have a4, although I'm not just sure if it's so strong here. So yeah, So remember this maneuver after c3. You have maybe the option to play d4. Obviously, always keep an eye on the pawn on e4. And, well, rook e1 is often a good move, and this maneuver. Also, if this knight is on f1, maybe you can also consider playing bishop e3 to try to trade off this bishop. This bishop is probably one of black's best pieces at the moment. So it would be perhaps interesting to exchange it. And you see that the Ruy Lopez is full of ideas. Pretty easy to understand. There is a lot of theory, that's true. But I think if you know the ideas and calculate, obviously you will have to study more than you maybe would have to do with other openings. But I do think it can be very beneficial for your chess growth, just to get exposed to many different structures, many different tactics that are available. And yeah, the Ruy Lopez is just a really interesting opening, I think. Finally, let's check out a recent game of mine. So I started with bishop b5, the Ruy Lopez. My opponent didn't really know the position, played d6, which is already not the best. a6 or knight f6, like I said, are probably the two best moves. So here I went d4. So immediately my opponent has to do some thinking. I think he thought for 10 or 15 minutes here. Well, maybe 10 minutes, not sure. He ended up taking, which is, I think, probably just the best. And after takes, bishop d7 to cover the knight. Here I played knight to c3, just developing. And what I do want you to take note of is that you might think, well, can't black just trade off everything? And it's true, he can trade, but I want you to keep an eye on where, after the trades, where our pieces are, where his pieces are. So takes. Here it's important, I think, to insert a check on d7. And after queen takes d7, queen takes d4. First of all, notice the super active position of our queen. So bishop e7 isn't possible, since we can take on g7. Also long castle for the moment isn't possible, since that will drop the pawn here on a6. Also, there is no knight to chase away the queen. So maybe one idea for black could be knight e7, knight c6, although that would take to tempi again. So we have more control of the center. Our pawn is on the 4th rank, black's pawn is on the 6th rank. This knight is already very active, also protects this pawn here. So looks like I went a little overboard with my arrows. So here my opponent played bishop e7. Either he didn't notice that I could take on g7, or he thought bishop f6 would counterattack the knight. But here I have a very nice symmetrical idea of queen takes g7, queen g3, covering the knight. You see? So takes. Also, you might think, well, I was doubting also, what if the rook comes to g8? Well, won't I have any trouble then? But you have to also appreciate that that would take 1, 2, 3 moves. So first, first of all, black will have to castle to protect this rook. Then the knight will have to come out to vacate the square for the rook. And then after 3 moves, the rook can come to g8. So in fact, I have pretty much all the time in the world to get my queen out of there. So bishop f6, queen g3, covering this. And after the castle's long, I played bishop d2. The engine quite liked bishop g5 to trade off probably black's best piece. I went bishop d2 here. I just want to castle long as quickly as possible. Also overprotect this knight. After rook e8, there is f3, that's possible, but I just castle long. The point is that black can't win this pawn, since after here and here, this rook here is hanging, so black doesn't have time to take this pawn on e4. That's why I just castles long. Knight e7, and now the rook probably comes to g8, so I got my queen out of there. And I thought probably one of the best squares is d3. One thing I have to be a little bit careful about is knight jumps to e5 or b4, but it's not such a big deal. After knight c6, I played knight d5, attacking this bishop. Knight e5, I have, I think, a nice in-between move, queen a3. You see, black can't ignore this. So maybe black has some ideas of bringing the knight to the queen side, but because black can't ignore this threat, black wins the tempo and I win the tempo, and it's just a good position for white. So after knight d5, black went bishop d8, which I thought was very passive, although the engine seems to think it's okay. Here I played f4, taking control of some more squares. You might think, well, doesn't that weaken the pawn? But not really, since I can protect it with this. I can bring this knight back. I can also always consider pushing it. So it's only weak if black can attack it. And here that's definitely not the case. Here my opponent missed an obvious fork. So knight f6. He counterattacks here my a2 pawn. And I had to calculate correctly, but I figured that after queen takes e2, I can play queen a3, threatening this, and threatening this. Well, you will see. So first I took his rook, he took with the queen. Then, since black, would capture my knight anyway, I took the opportunity to insert a check and win another pawn and expose the king. So here, after queen takes e3, I'm threatening this. For example, queen e6 loses, I think, to queen c3. Yeah. Even though this might look scary, the king can always come out via this way. That's why my opponent took f5, just took this. Here g4 was best. I played g3. You see I have 3 connected pawns here, which will be very powerful in the endgame, in this endgame. I'm an exchange up. This pawn is weak, this pawn is weak. So it's just a really good position for me. Black tried some trick with knight e4, but I can just play bishop c3, protect my bishop with my king, and black will win an exchange. back, but that's okay since I'm trying to trade pieces anyway. And here the key move is rook takes e8. If I don't play this, maybe black has some ideas of going bishop a5. Now it's not possible. And after knight takes d1, king takes d1, the queen comes to d7. Now this pawn is weak, can't be defended. And now after king e6, I just traded into a winning pawn endgame. These pawns can never promote. My pawns are in the way. My king will come to here to help stop them. And well, against 3 connected pass pawns, the king just can't do anything. So king d3, b5, c3. His idea is probably try to create a connected. Try to create a pass pawn here on the a file. So king d4, king d6, h4, finally running my pawn up the board. And after b4, I think a takes b4 is probably still winning, but you don't want to give black any counterplay. And after c takes b4, my opponent resigned. So here I put pressure on this knight. Black played an inaccurate move. I put some more pressure on the center. And after we traded all these pieces, my queen is super active here. I have a pawn further up the board. I have 2 pieces developed in the center. Black isn't castled yet. So here he made a mistake of allowing me to take this pawn. Obviously he has to do something about this rook, so I think f6 is just necessary. Then I draw back. Here bishop g5 was best, but just bishop d2 is also quite alright. Rook e8, castles long with the point that this is a bad move, since I can just take. And after some more moves, I could just convert my position. Here my opponent made the fatal mistake of allowing this fork here. And I traded off into winning endgame. And here my opponent maybe thought that he could save himself with this tactic. But it turns out that in the end this is still winning for white. And I think it's a very nice example of the Ruy Lopez. Obviously there's a lot more theory to the Ruy Lopez than this. But also I think that if you know a couple of key ideas, this will already get you very far. And well, it's just a very interesting opening to play if you really want to improve your chess. You will encounter a lot of different ideas, a lot of different positions, and maybe you will encounter someone who knows the theory of a certain line much better than you do, and maybe he will give you some trouble, or maybe you'll even lose. But that's true, I think, of pretty much any opening. Yeah, it's a really interesting opening that puts pressure on black right from the beginning. It's an evergreen, an opening which you can play for your entire life and probably study for your entire life. It's just so rich. So, well, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, subscribe, or leave a comment. And I will see you maybe in one of the next ones.